Alright, so first off, how many people remember those WH words that you learned about, like they taught you in English class or literature class or reading class when you were like 7? And then they told you about them every single year for the rest of like, I don't know, middle school, and then they stopped talking about them.
The who's and the what's?
Yeah, the who's and the what's, exactly. So, we are today going to be talking about just who's and what's and why's of paper writing. So the main ones we're going to be talking about, we're going to skip over who, pretty straightforward, everybody in this class. Where, well, wherever you write, and when, whenever's convenient for you. Those ones aren't interesting. The interesting ones for us are why, what, and how. So, why, what, and how. So, the first one is why. What do you think comes after the why? Why? If I'm asking, yeah, why are you writing papers? Or more generally, why on earth do teachers assign you papers? And why specifically do I think, and basically my goal today is to convince you all that writing a philosophy paper is not a complete waste of your time. It's something which is useful to you in your everyday lives, and also, the other thing, that every single one of you is very capable of writing a damn good paper because it's no different than something you've been doing for your entire lives, just not in a classroom, not written down. That's all we're going to be doing, is try and convince you, and that when you're done, you will have been practicing something which is worth practicing because it's useful. Oh, how do you lock the door? So, the what is just going to be what is a philosophy paper, or what does a good philosophy paper look like? And then the how is how do you write a good one, or how do you make your paper a good paper? And so, those are all we're going to talk about today. Why are we doing this? What is it that we're doing? And how do you do it well? So, these two we're going to start with. The why do we write papers, and specifically why do we write this type of paper? And also, what is it that we're writing? And they go hand in hand, because unless you know what you're doing, it's hard to understand why you're doing it. But unless you know why you're doing something, it's really hard to care about what it is you're doing. So let's just start off. And this is one with no right answer. Why do you write papers? Why is it that your evil professors or teachers or anyone asks you to write a paper? Why is it that we don't just say, no one ever has to write again? And this is a question which not enough professors take the time to pause and ask you about. They say do this, but no, not why. So why is it that we who pause and some of us who think about it a lot, why do we care? What are the reasons? So one thing is just, one is you prove / better understand the material. So, one general purpose thing is that, and here's the thing about professors, most of us are really interested in what we work on. I mean, we wouldn't have done it otherwise. But for this reason, we all have this sometimes overly strong sense that what we're talking about is worth everybody else's time. So a lot of people start to think like, oh, my students need to prove that they fully understand this topic because if I'm so interested in it, everyone should be. Now I, however, am not under illusions that my class is the most important thing in the world or in your lives or anything like that. Now I do care that some of the aspects of what we talk about in this class are things that you should understand. Like, if you go around in the world, you should know how your privacy is at risk and what you can do to protect it. That's just something you should all understand how to do living in a digital world. But if you don't understand the intricacies in and out, I don't mind quite as much as some other people might. So this, while a very important reason, I'm going to give it, say, 2 stars, not 3. What are some other reasons to write papers?
Busy work.
Yeah, busy work. So here's another reason why people write papers, I'm not going to write this one out, is literally just teachers like to have things they can grade you on. So like they need something to grade you on. You can't just give everyone an A. That is a dumb reason to assign papers, so I'm not even going to write it up here, but that is some reason why someone writes papers. What are some other reasons?
It's going to make us think.
Yeah. Critical thinking. this is the one that matters to me. What a paper for this class is an exercise in critical thinking. And what do I mean by critical thinking? It's just, thinking about something really hard and identifying what somebody else is saying and why they're saying it, and therefore being able to make an informed opinion of your own about it. That's all critical thinking is, and that's what this paper is. It's just an exercise in critical thinking.
While we're talking about what grade us on, will you talk about like what you want grade us on to?
Yeah, I will talk about the how of what sorts of things I care about and what sorts of things I don't, but before we get there, and I'm just going to tell you right now, one thing which frustrates the hell out of people writing philosophy papers is there's not a right answer, there's not a wrong answer. And if you're unhappy about that, welcome to life. Life is gray. Most of your life will not have a clear right and wrong answer. The things in which you are either right or wrong are very rare and the nice, easy parts of the world. The reason why critical thinking is useful is because just because there's not a clear right and wrong answer doesn't mean there are some things you should do and shouldn't do. Some things which are just blatantly not true, and other things which are valuable and worth thinking about. So the reason why I think writing philosophy papers is useful is just because it's an exercise in critical thinking, which is something which, the better you are at critical thinking, the better your life will be. Like, simple as that. And we'll talk more in a second about what on earth that means. So, but that's basically what it is. That's why it's basically just a way, in the same way that you can practice any other skill in the world that you need to get around in life. A philosophy paper is a very artificial, almost lab environment to make you all practice critical thinking. Now, this sounds very big and fancy and all of that, but basically, the next part of the what is a philosophy paper, so we just gave the general why, and we'll come back around once we talk more about the what. But if that's the general why, what is a philosophy paper? And I'll give you a clue. If you have the reading with you, it's the literal first line of the reading.
Consists of the reasoned defense of some claims?
Yes, that is what a philosophy paper, reasoned defense of some claim. And then the other key bit is that he doesn't say because it's kind of obvious, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, is what form is the philosophy paper in? Yeah, it's written down. That's the key. It's not spoken, it's not signed, it's written. Written down, reasoned defense. Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because there are plenty of other ways of doing reasoned defenses of claims. And that's what I'm going to say, is that the only thing that makes this paper different than things you've done in most of your life is the written down bit. So, let's start here. What are some other things that you write down, and why do you do it? Not just you, but writing in general. Why do people write things down? So to memorize them. Just simple things of like you write down facts, or there are lots of things which you cannot remember, so you just write them down. For instance, telephone numbers, that sort of thing.
Wouldn't it be too general, like written down reasoned defense of some claim? In any subject you can do so.
But not all writing is a reasoned defense. So here's the difference.
In any science classes, whether or not this and this will lead to this and this, like you can write to this topic and defend your claim.
And that's exactly why this borders on something you've done your entire life. The whole idea here is to say that this is not unique to philosophy. Does anyone know what science used to be called until about the 1800s? Natural philosophy. It was originally part of philosophy until they got instruments that were too fancy, and philosophers couldn't keep up. And the same thing, any field whatsoever, reasoned defense of some claim is no different than what you do in any other topic. Now, what I want to do first off is say that not everything that gets written down is a reasoned defense of some claim, but every field you go into, you can find writing that is a reasoned defense of some claim. So what are some other types of writing that we can throw out of here? We've got like to-do lists and notes and things like that. Those are not a reasoned defense of some claim. What are some other things people write down? Yeah, so to keep a record, anything like that, where it's like you had information and you just want to make sure that it gets preserved. But those aren't the only reasons that people write things down. Or at the very least, the types of writing that there are. What are some other types of writing? How many of you have taken an English class at some point in your life, or a literature class?
Fiction.
Yeah, fiction. What's the point of fiction? And why? How many of you have read a fiction book? Other than it was assigned to you, why might you have read a fiction book? It's interesting and it's fun. Reading stories is interesting and fun. That's what it comes down to. That's not what a philosophy paper is either. So, things that get written down. In the same sort of vein, we have music lyrics. Those are things which people write not to prove any point, but just because they want to make you feel something, or they want to put their feelings into words. Or notes, that's another thing that aren't writing, of a philosophical or reason-based thing. Now, what's another type of writing along these lines? We've got fiction stories, and poems, and musical lyrics. But then, Uzbek, did you have a hand?
Well, we compared it with fictional reading, but in philosophical reading, we have lots of fictional pieces.
And so this is, what the difference is purpose. The difference of what the difference is between a philosophy paper or a science paper versus, say, a short story is why is it written? What's the purpose of it? And a philosophy paper, while it might involve fictional examples, you are never going to read a philosophy paper to a child when they fall asleep. Not the right sort of writing. In the same way, you are never going to take a philosophy paper and put it to music and then sing it to people. It would be the worst song ever. Another reason that we have things of this sort is just to record in facts. So it can be the sort of thing like record keeping, or just like a descriptive news story or an encyclopedia article, where it's just like, somebody just talked about the Roman Empire. I know nothing about it. Let me go and have somebody else tell me what the Roman Empire was and when it was around, etc. And all of these, again, you will be drawing on facts in a reasoned defense of some claim, but that's not the sole purpose of it. So that's how to think of different types of writing. Is the written down comes in lots of forms. Some of them are for description. Some of them are for just aesthetic purposes of it sounds pretty, it looks nice. Others are because it's fun, fiction. Human beings, we like stories. That's just the sort of creatures we are. So, if it's not any of those, what do we mean by a reasoned defense of some claim? What on earth does this mean? We can break it down. There's basically three main parts: reasoned, defense, and claim. So, which part do you want to tackle first? Yeah, reason. Okay. So, how many of you have heard the word reasons in your everyday life? What's the context in which you've heard it? What was something and what was the reason someone gave you for it? What does it mean? Give me just some example or something along those lines. When somebody says, this was my reason, what on earth are they talking about?
Their explanation.
Yeah, there's an explanation, and what was yours of that?
Some sort of motive for action.
Do you say model for action?
Motive.
Motive, yeah. So it's a motive or an explanation, and both of these have to do with why. That's the key word, is this why thing. And this is the difference between different types of writing. So, in a case of like a story, you don't care about the why of, like, it's not trying to convince you of something. It's just why, or it's just what was this imaginary world like? What are the characters doing in it? That sort of thing. In a reasoned defense, the key is you are bringing up things. So reasons are things having to do with why, and then why are you bringing up these why reasons? Why are you talking about your explanations and your motivations? What is the overall purpose of it? I'll give you a clue. It's the other part of this thing. Yeah, defend a claim. So what do we mean by a claim? Another one we can say is, to use our big fancy English class word, a thesis. Other words are conclusion, thing I think you should believe. So, right now we've got the purpose of this is written down. Why is it that you should come to think something? And specifically, the defense of some claim kind of all goes together. It's basically, all this paper is telling someone why they should believe something. That's all it is. Give me an encounter sometime that you've had during the past week in which you tried to explain to someone why they should believe something or why they should do something. Or, more generally, why is this a useful skill? Why is being able to do a good job of giving reasoned defenses of claims a useful thing to do as a human being in the world?
Your point comes across, like, your
So,
argument.
here's a fun thing. We all live in a world with other human beings. Sometimes, you need those other human beings to do things for you. You want them to think things about you. You want them to be nice to you, to be your friend. You don't want them to take your stuff. How can you get human beings to do things that you want them to do? There are many ways of doing it. One of them has to do with trust, but it's not just that they trust you. Once they trust you, why does it matter? Why do you want somebody to trust you if you're trying to get them to do what you want? No, you're on the right track. I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass, but so yeah, there's a sense in which if they trust you, they're willing to listen to you. And when someone's willing to listen to you, why does that make a difference? Because if someone's listening to you, their mind is paying attention to what you're doing. It's very easy to get human beings to do what you want them to do if you've got certain types of things. So, for instance, if you've got enough power, which is what we talked about, or you can threaten someone, or you can blackmail them, you can get anyone to do whatever you want them to do. What's harder to do? What, if you can convince someone of something, what are you affecting? Not their body, but their mind. If you can get in someone's head and get them to believe something, that is a very useful skill. And it doesn't have to be something manipulative. It doesn't have to be something over the top. It doesn't have to be trying to convince someone to give you all their money. It can be something as simple as you want to have tacos for dinner, and your best friend isn't so sure, and you want to convince them to get tacos. Now, there are many ways you can do this. One of them is you pull out your handy gun and hold it to their head and say, we're getting tacos or else. But that's not a very useful way of doing it. Amongst other things, what are the problems with pulling out a gun on your best friend? Yeah, you don't have a best friend anymore, because a good way of losing your friend is to pull guns on them. Also, there are many other problems which can come with this. However, you know what's a good way of doing it? You explain to them why not only you want tacos, but why they should want tacos as well. And if you can convince them that they should want tacos as well, you're getting tacos. You're getting what you want. You're getting any sort of thing that, like, and this is not the same, or this is the same sort of thing you have in any other point in your life. What are some other examples from your everyday lives? What is something that you have done in the past week, or you've seen somebody else seen somebody else do, that it just involves giving reasons that somebody should believe something, or they should do something? So none of you talked to anybody this week. So I'm sorry that I'm the first person you've talked to. Must be very lonely. The question is, give me another example of a time during this past week or month in which you have given a reasoned defense of some claim in your everyday lives, or you've seen somebody else do it.
I tried to convince my roommate that he had to create more complex passwords.
That's a very good one. In that case, what was your claim? What was the thing you were trying to get him to believe?
I actually showed him a spin of 4.5 million password and logins, like it's open to what.
And so,
I'm saying.
what we can see here is the claim that you were trying to get him to believe. At the end of the day, your goal was to get him to believe he needs more complex passwords. That's all it was. And then when you brought up the paste bin, or you just told him all the different passwords, that's the defense. All this comes down to is you've got a claim, or a what, and then you've got your reasons to defend that claim or to explain why someone else should accept that claim, and that's the why. That's all this is you telling someone what and then explaining why. And this is no different than anything else you do any time in your lives. Parents with their children, you're explaining to your child, or you were explained to as a child, why you should stop screaming. There are many ways for a parent to get a child to stop screaming. One of them is to explain to the child why they really shouldn't want to scream anymore. Or, what are political candidates trying to do? Vote for me, here's why. Or, what is every advertising company trying to do? Buy our product, and here's why. And that's every element. When your guidance counselor is telling you what classes to take, what classes, why you should take them. When you're deciding where to go to school, what class you should go to, or what school you should go to, and why. That's all it is. It's no different than anything you've done for your entire life. That's all a philosophy paper is. The only difference is it's written down, and it's on a topic which is a little more complicated and specialized to this class. But if you can do this in your everyday lives, and you're used to doing this, philosophy papers are the same idea. Don't let the fact that it's called a philosophy paper, and I'm giving you a lot of weird prompts and things, change the fact that all you're doing is just explaining to me why I should believe something. And that's the big difference here, is when you're giving a reasoned defense, and the big key about reasons is, it's not just telling someone why you believe it, it's trying to convince them that they should believe it. In the same way that, like, if you're talking to your friend about getting tacos for dinner and you go, I'm really in the mood for tacos, it's Tuesday. Yeah, Taco Tuesday, yes. If you just say, that might explain why you want tacos, but that's not going to make them in any way want tacos, unless you explain to them, and everyone loves Taco Tuesday, everything's off, like half price off at the taco place. Then you start to give them reasons that they're on board with. Or if you tell someone, like, I'm a New York Knicks fan, like, the correct response to that is, I feel sorry for you. The correct response to that is not, I'm going to become a New York Knicks fan too. Now, if you can explain to someone why they should become a New York Knicks fan, then it's a reasoned defense. So there's a difference between just describing your own views and explain to someone else why they should. And unfortunately, right now with the Knicks, there's not any real great reason other than you were born into it and you were stuck with it. So that's all these papers are, is you give a claim and then you say why you should believe it. Give me a second to take a sip of water. Everyone on board with why I'm saying it's not as big of a scary deal as it might seem when a professor comes along and gives you like a 6-page thing and says, here, write a paper. It's really, don't let the fact that it's written down scare you. All right. Now, why do I say this is a useful skill? Why is it good to practice this here? Well, as I said, it's everywhere in your lives, and most of the time, there are bigger consequences than will I get an A or not. Like, let's be honest, if you get convinced of something by a politician and you vote a certain way, the implications are quite possibly bigger than if you are, you know, deciding whether or not to write about a fictional prompt in a class. So it's just practice. And it's a useful practice because the world is not black and white. And this is where we come into the how. And this is why philosophy papers are tough, is because when you're giving reasoned defenses of things, there are many ways to approach it and many different sorts of reasons you can give. You can look at a paper and you can go, oh, that reason doesn't make any sense, or that's not a good reason. Or you can go, oh, that is a good reason, but sometimes it's in between, you're not sure, and that's why it's worth doing these in a paper setting. Because until you've really thought about something and tried to, the nice thing about writing is that you can take your time and make sure that you're saying exactly what you want to say. When you're talking to somebody face to face, you're gonna misspeak, you're not gonna like remember what you said 30 seconds earlier. With a paper, the nice thing is you can see, oh, I can see what I said 30 seconds earlier because it's up 6 lines. Like that sort of thing that's why writing, and much of the time, you in your lives will be writing. These days, with email being so easy, a lot of how you communicate in a job setting, in a professional setting, will be writing. So if you know how to do this sort of thing, and there will be cases in which you're giving reasoned defenses to your boss. Your boss says, I need you to decide whether we open a new office in Shanghai or London. What they're asking for is a reasoned defense of where to open it. So that's all we're talking about here. All right, everyone on board with the what and the why? Okay. The rest of class, we can talk about how. How do you do this well? And basically, as I said, there is not a right answer to this question. The fact is that writing a philosophy paper well, or going outside of a philosophy paper to any sort of reasoned defense, there is no guaranteed way to do it well. There are many different ways to do it well, and there are many different ways to do it poorly. And it's going to depend on what claim you're defending, what things you're knowledgeable about, what sorts of things the other person might be convinced by. And this is why there is no obvious answer. It's the same sort of thing where, like, if I were to tell you, like, if you come across a book that says, follow these 5 steps and you'll get rich, like, no, there's too many factors that go into that. And this, like, you can't, they're very complicated things. You can't just tell someone, do this, and this will happen. So in the same way, there's no one way to write a very good reasoned argument or a very good philosophy paper. There are many ways of doing it, some of which are better, some of which are worse. There are, however, certain guidelines that are useful.